I sent money back home to help my family. I was scared to lose my job.
If someone steals money from their employer, they could be guilty of a serious crime. But what if an employer takes money from their employees' paychecks?
Oh, don't worry, I'll pay you next time I have money in 3 weeks.
Our investigation found there's a good chance they'll get away with it.
And at the end of the day, they're just told that they're not going to get paid.
Wage theft costs Americans more than any other kind of theft. So we worked with reporters across the country to question employers, lawmakers.
Real talk here. What's it going to take?
And even the head of the Department of Labor.
What do you say to people who've been waiting years to get wages that are owed to them, that have been stolen from them?
I would just say hang in there.
Asking questions for the hundreds of thousands of employees, wondering, is anyone going to help us get what we're owed? I'm Ash-har Quraishi. Burglar alarms protect your home. Passcodes protect your data. But what about your paycheck? That's what we wanted to know after learning about a spike in wage theft by employers from our colleague Julie Watts, an investigative reporter in Sacramento. She worked with the reporting team at the nonpartisan nonprofit Cal Matters. They found wage theft cost California workers an estimated $2 billion a year.
So for 17 years, you never got a raise.
Nunca me aumentaron 100.
This is a photo of Eloisa's kids when she began working at a local fast food restaurant. These are her kids today. Her daughter now drops her off at work because Eloisa still can't afford her own car.
Muy difícil. Very hard.
Her reporting made us wonder, is it just California, or is this also a growing problem in other parts of the country? Our data team submitted public records requests to nearly every state labor department in the nation and built this first-of-its-kind database of more than 650,000 wage theft complaints. We learned that of those complaints, state agencies ruled in favor of employees half the time. We also found that even if you do fight for what you're owed, you might never get paid. Asael Espinosa spends his nights on the road delivering pizzas in Chicago.
Me encanta hacer delivery porque la gente está contenta cuando llega su comida.
But on some nights, he says, the longer he works, the less he makes. $4 per delivery.
De casi una hora solamente he hecho 2 deliveries, que son $8. Entonces, si ustedes se dan cuenta, tal vez a lo mejor no estoy ganando ni el mínimo, tal vez.
The pizzeria owner claims drivers are independent contractors, paid by the delivery, not the hour. But Espinosa says he works a scheduled shift, and that he's expected to clean and stock shelves when he's not delivering, without getting paid a dime.
We've found about 24 different ways that employers steal workers. Some are pretty straightforward, some are a little more creative.
Arise Chicago is a group that helps workers through the complicated process of recovering stolen wages.
Often what we see with people who come to us with wage theft cases is, I feel like my employer did this because they were confident they could get away with it.
A worker goes into that factory or goes into the restaurant, every day their tips are stolen, or every day they're not paid overtime. So it adds up and up and up and over time till it becomes billions of dollars.
Natis, escucha! Estamos en la lucha! Natis, escucha!
The drivers say they tried and failed to negotiate with their boss, who declined to talk to us. So the workers are taking their fight public. The point of today's gathering is really to announce that they're filing a lawsuit to try and get those wages for their workers, but also to give the owner of the pizza shop an opportunity to come to the table and try and sidestep this so that there isn't a court case that goes forward. Weeks after the protest, the owner filed a motion to dismiss that lawsuit. Whether it's a court battle or a complaint at the state or federal level, the process can be excruciatingly slow. The enforcement part of it seems to be lagging.
Well, that explains the magnitude of the problem.
U.S. Secretary of Labor Marty Walsh told us his wage and hour division is inundated with tens of thousands of complaints each year.
What do you say to people who've been waiting years to get wages that are owed to them, that have been stolen from them?
I would just say hang in there. I mean, our job is to do as quickly as we can to recoup the wages and the money that you're owed, and we're going to continue to fight for you every single day. You know, I'll apologize for the longevity of a case.
In California, for a decision on a claim, workers wait longer than in any other state we looked at, a median of 439 days. And more than half of those who were found to be owed money never got paid. So, one California county is chopping that wait, forcing restaurant owners who've stolen wages to pay up or shut down.
We can revoke their food permit for non-compliance with some of the laws they're required to comply with, including these wage and hour laws.
And that goes a step further than what existed previous to this, or what exists at the state level, right?
It does, and you know, I will say we've been very fortunate because we've had 100% success rate so far in actually getting businesses who we've reached out to comply without taking that step.
There's also a movement in Washington to pass a bill that would shorten wait times and increase penalties nationwide.
Why do you think there's been a lack of consequences, of accountability for so long?
I think it's the lobby of the business lobby.
Lobbyists who oppose changing federal wage theft law argue it would hurt businesses and benefit trial lawyers more than employees.
We have to extract serious penalties if they are stealing money that is legally owed to a worker.
How hopeful are you that this legislation will get the support it needs to become law?
It's going to be difficult. It is going to be difficult.
For now, it remains largely up to the employee to monitor pay and fight for what's owed.
¿Cuánto tiempo vas a luchar?
No importa cuánto tiempo se tarde, pero vamos a seguir luchando.
From New York to Los Angeles, Minneapolis to Dallas, in the next hour, we take a look at how much American workers are owed. Wage theft hurts American workers from coast to coast. Los Angeles investigative reporter Ross Palumbo reveals the extent of the problem in California and goes in search of the employer hit with the biggest wage theft fine in state history.
For years now, Antonio Dominguez has been working to make his future shine, coming to this country with nothing more than ambition and elbow grease, polishing countless cars, and hoping to see success shining back in this reflection.
Es un trabajo duro, ¿sí?
Sí.
It's a tough job.
Muy duro.
Very tough, very hard.
And the hardest part, he says, has just been trying to get paid. Dominguez started by working here at this car wash in Culver City, washing and drying cars for 6 years. Until, he says, he finally realized he was the one being taken to the cleaners.
Ellos te deben dinero?
They owe you money, I asked.
Prácticamente sí.
Basically, yeah. They wanted us to come in early. They didn't give us our lunches, our 10 minutes.
They start figuring like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not getting paid for all the hours that I worked.
So it adds up.
Yeah, it definitely does.
I mean, we're talking, what, thousands at the end of the year?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That's just for one worker. Flor Rodriguez helped organize 63 more employees from the same car wash and filed a claim with the California Labor Commission.
And you believe there are millions of dollars that car wash owes employees?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The state agreed and cited the car wash for $2.36 million for wage theft, saying workers weren't being paid for waiting time, saying there was no overtime pay, and saying managers regularly altered workers' time cards to reduce total hours worked.
If it's happening at car washes, do you think it's happening at other places?
Definitely happening in many other places. Wage theft, it's definitely rampant.
In fact, our analysis of data obtained by CalMatters from the State Department of Industrial Relations found tens of thousands of cases across California. 63,442 claims of wage theft since 2017, totaling more than $500 million. The median amount of those claims is $2,070. And similarly, across the state, that comes out to be about 1.5 weeks' salary, or 9 weeks of groceries, or 1 month's rent, or 80% of a median mortgage payment. And even if the state orders a claim to be paid, California's own data shows more than half, 58%, never see a dime. And only about a third, 28%, ever get paid in full. That means out of over $500 million in wages across California, our investigation found that the state has only recovered $126,853,456. That's less than a quarter of the money, only 23%.
It's shameful.
State Senator Marie Durazo has been working to change those numbers, change how the state regulators deal with wage theft. By law, the Labor Commission has 135 days to hear and decide a case, but our investigation found the median time the state takes to resolve a case is more than 3 times longer, 439 days.
Does that bother you, that the state appears to be breaking its own law?
Of course it bothers me.
Is the state doing its job?
We are not doing our job. We are not doing, the state is not doing its job. And we need to change things.
Car washer Antonio Dominguez's complaint helped lead the state to cite the car wash in 2019. And now, nearly 4 years later, he still hasn't seen a dime. The car wash did file an appeal. We tried to speak with owner Human Nisani, but only found a new manager.
I haven't seen that in my supervision. I'm a manager, so.
That doesn't happen here.
I haven't seen that in.
And here it is Beverly Hills mansion that records show Nisani's LLC purchased in 2018, the one with an N on the gate and cars with plates registered to his dealership in the driveway. The woman at the door says she never heard of him.
Human Nisani? Isn't this his home?
No.
After rescheduling with us time and time again, Nisani's attorney said they would not comment on the worker's specific allegations, but did say overall they're not true.
Es difícil, no?
Isn't it hard?
Fue muy difícil.
It was very hard. The problem is that we didn't know where to go.
Hard to keep working and waiting for justice from both his former employer and state regulators who were supposed to keep business owners clean.
On the other side of the country, New York reporter Tony Aiello found out some employees say their bosses get away with wage theft by threatening them. And he met some high school students who are trying to be a part of the solution.
At the Community Resource Center in Mamaroneck, worker advocate Luis Zarate says wage theft is a big focus. And we found it's a big issue in New York State.
And at the end of the day, they're just told that they're not going to get paid. They feel angry, they feel frustrated.
Since 2010, workers filed almost 53,000 wage theft claims, totaling almost $364 million in unpaid wages, tip income, and overtime. Just 59% of the claimants received payments totaling $220 million. Only 21% of the cases were paid in full. Zarate says some employers have learned how to avoid paying up.
They either hide their assets, they allocate it, they create a new entity, they declare bankruptcy, and then they create a new entity and they just keep doing business as usual.
Many wage theft victims are recent immigrants, their status weaponized by unscrupulous employers.
So employers will tell them there's nothing you can do, you have to be worried about immigration, customs enforcement, ICE.
We will report you to ICE if you go against us. We've heard that many times.
People can work so hard and just to support their families, to support themselves, and they get nothing. It's really heartbreaking to us.
These students at Mamaroneck High School are part of a program addressing social issues, focusing this year on wage theft.
We have some people in the school who their parents or maybe them themselves are suffering from this issue, and then we have people sitting next to them who have no idea it's even going on.
Rather than shame those committing wage theft, they created stickers honoring businesses that pledge to follow ethical pay practices.
It is beautiful to see young people really getting interested in these issues.
Zarate says the students have organized a wage theft community forum to build awareness of the problem and help available for workers to fight wage theft and collect what they're owed.
Workers most impacted by wage theft? immigrants, women, and minorities. And one state is publicly shaming employers who steal from them. That's next. We're looking at how wage theft is harming American workers nationwide. In Texas, investigative reporter Brian New learned the Lone Star State is publicly shaming thousands of guilty employers to get them to pay up.
For 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, Oscar Torres worked remodeling an old Dallas apartment complex. But when it was time to get paid, he wasn't.
But what happens is the subcontractors then just disappear.
Torres' employer, a small remodeling company, did not pay him for 10 days of work, totaling $1,400. Money Torres earned and needed.
I've fallen behind on rent, have had to decide to cut back on food expenses or even pay for gas to then be able to go to another job.
While wage theft occurs in many industries, in Texas, it's especially prominent in construction. According to a survey conducted by the University of Texas and the Workers' Defense Project, 1 in 5 construction workers reported being denied payment for their work. Victims of stolen wages can file a claim with the Texas Workforce Commission. Torres did just that. When the state investigated, Torres won, receiving a judgment for the money he was owed. But despite winning his case, Torres has yet to receive a dime of his stolen wages. Thousands of Texas workers every year end up empty-handed after submitting a wage theft claim with the state.
Do you feel like the system is working for workers?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, everything that we do, and this is me not being corny, but everything that we do, we think about the individual.
Since 2010, nearly 150,000 wage theft claims have been filed in Texas. State investigators dismissed more than half of those, citing a lack of jurisdiction, lack of evidence, or workers withdrawing claims. This leaves 62,000 claims where state investigators determined workers were indeed owed wages. But that doesn't mean these workers were paid. According to state data, only 37,000 claims resulted in the Texas Workforce Commission recouping money for workers.
We've heard from workers who report that their employer laughed at them when they said that they have rights. They seem very used to, comfortable with the system and know that there's ways to get around paying workers.
Texas employers who owe more than $2,000 in wages are put on a publicly posted list. There are currently more than 10,000 names on this list. The Texas Workforce Commission can also put a warrant hold on these companies, preventing them from doing business with the state or receiving money owed from a state agency.
It is frustrating.
In the past 4 years, the Texas Workforce Commission has ruled Torres has been a victim of wage theft 4 times by 4 different employers. In each case, Torres has yet to recoup any money.
I believe in justice and justice here in Texas, and that's why I keep filing cases, because I believe at some point I will be able to recover my stolen wages.
In Baltimore, reporter Mike Helgren found some employees who had to take their complaints to the federal government. That's because their boss is the state of Maryland.
I didn't get off until about 2 hours beyond my shift.
They worked.
You do a job, you expect to be compensated.
And worked.
Why are we not getting paid?
And these state correctional employees say when their paychecks came, they were shortchanged.
I wasn't compensated for the 2 hours that I was forced to work overtime. And it was just continuing and continuing. It never showed up on my check.
There have been more than 8,000 wage theft claims to the Maryland Department of Labor since 2009, costing employees more than $20 million.
Our members are taxpayers, they're hardworking citizens, and they deserve to get paid for every hour, every minute they work.
How did you find out it was so widespread?
People coming forward and saying, no, I know I worked more than this, and they could prove they worked more than this.
Correctional officers have a tough job, and as is common for many after the pandemic, they've had to pick up the slack because of shortages. We met with some who work in the Jessup facilities.
It's not like we just, working for free. We showed up. We did our part.
When did you notice something was wrong with your paycheck?
In July 2017.
and others who work at lockups in Baltimore.
They said that it was a grace period of 15 minutes in the beginning and 15 minutes at the end. And the state has refused to compensate us for the actual hours that we actually work.
What does that extra money mean to you? What's the impact of not getting it?
I have to either pick up another job, something that can get me money quick, or I have to call and explain to the people that I owe money to, my mortgage company, my job messed my check up again.
Some are still waiting for the U.S. Department of Labor to resolve their claims. Among them, the officers allege that for years they were only paid for scheduled time, nothing more, and overtime was rounded off, so they never got the extra minutes it took to get to and leave their posts. Federal labor officials ordered the state to pay almost $500,000 in settlements to workers at the Jessup Correctional Institution. This sergeant is one of them.
You can't imagine other people going through these things, but they don't know where to turn to.
There's power together.
Yes, it's still going on. So, I mean, there's so much power in the union.
Their union, AFSCME, says more legislation under consideration in the General Assembly this session would help state education and transportation workers fight wage theft. AFSCME President Patrick Moran says the overtime issues for correctional officers all happened under the Hogan administration, and he's hopeful they won't happen again with new leadership in Annapolis.
You're asking people to go into a very dangerous situation each and every day. Okay, you're asking people to work overtime in a very stressful situation, and then you're not going to turn around and you're not going to pay them for that time. That is unacceptable.
One of the most frustrating findings, even when a worker files a claim, it can take months, even years, to have their case resolved. The Economic Policy Institute says wage theft costs Americans billions each year. Despite that, Boston investigative reporter Cheryl Fiandaca discovered it's a crime that often goes unreported.
Andre Rossetti has been painting for more than 20 years. He loves the job, but says he was not always paid for the work he did.
Sometimes they work 55 hours, but no pay extra money. Overtime is no pay.
Data shows from 2015, the Attorney General's office filed 2,419 wage theft cases and got workers more than $48 million in back pay. That's just the tip of the iceberg. Union organizer Rodrigo Badaro says much of wage theft is underreported.
It's so hard to measure. People are afraid to talk because they need the job. They need to support their family.
The Wage Theft Coalition estimates Massachusetts workers are owed $1 billion in pay a year. That translates into $100 million in lost revenue for the state. A report from the Attorney General's office shows in fiscal year 2022, the AG ordered employers to pay $7.5 million to employees and $4.2 million in penalties. But that's a drop in the bucket.
There's a critical need for legislation to fix this problem.
Massachusetts already has some of the strongest wage theft laws in the country. Senator Sal DiDomenico wants to strengthen the enforcement and is proposing legislation that would give the Attorney General the power to issue a stop work order and hold the lead contractor liable for subcontractors who cheat their workers.
Finally, for the first time, we're going to have people who are in charge of the contracts. They're going to be responsible for the non-payment of any overtime costs, non-paying of any salaries.
How much money do you think they owe you?
Maybe $10,000. That's a lot of money, a lot.
Since Cheryl first talked with Andre, we've learned his former employer died, which means he'll likely never see the money he's owed. Fast food workers are some of the most likely employees to be victims of wage theft. Investigative reporter Max Darrow in San Francisco met one woman who says it happened to her, and she's fighting back.
As 2023 begins, Maria Arroyo holds on to hope that this will be the year she is finally paid for years of work that she claims she's owed.
Is it tough to be patient?
Sí.
Arroyo, a single mom with 3 kids, worked at a Jack in the Box franchise in Oakland for 15 years until 2019, when she says she was a victim of wage theft.
Sí, pues yo ya tenía mucho tiempo trabajando para ellos y no estaba ganando ni siquiera como los nuevos.
Among the issues, Arroyo says she wasn't getting paid minimum wage, didn't get additional pay she was entitled to for working an overnight shift, wasn't being paid sick leave she was entitled to, and repeatedly had paychecks bounce. After 3 months of no resolution with her management, Arroyo left that job in 2019.
Y entonces yo les dije, yo no más trabajo, así yo no más. Y ya dijeron, ok.
With help from the San Francisco-based organization Legal Aid at Work, she filed a wage theft claim with the state. According to the claim, Arroyo says she's owed around $15,500 plus penalties. But even though it's been 3.5 years since she filed the claim, Arroyo has yet to see a penny. In fact, she says she's still waiting for a hearing and doesn't know why that's the case.
No, yo pensé maybe unos 6 meses.
We reached out to Arroyo's former employer about the allegation, but did not hear back.
Big picture, do you plan on bringing any new legislation to the table this year to try and better address the issue of wage theft in California?
I'm absolutely looking at bringing legislation. We don't know exactly what that will look like. Part of it could very well be in the budget to make sure, again, there's some kind of fund for workers that are waiting this very long period of time for their cases to be adjudicated.
According to this analysis of the data, the median amount for a wage theft claim was around $2,070. That's equivalent to about 9 weeks of groceries for a family in California. But almost a quarter of the cases filed from 2017 to 2021 were for amounts more than $10,000, like Arroyo's claim.
Yo tengo la esperanza que a lo mejor sí tomen mi caso, aunque sea un poquito tarde.
But for now, all she can do is wait and hold on to hope that this will be the year she gets a resolution.
Sí. Sí.
It's possible you could be owed wages without even realizing it. To see if there's money waiting for you, you can check the Department of Labor's database on its website. You can also download their free timesheet app to record your hours and calculate your pay. An easy way to track your wages. In Colorado, wage theft is a felony, and still the only recourse workers have to get what they're owed is to sue their employer. Here's investigative reporter Brian Moss.
Alita Ayo was a caregiver for 8 people with mental illness at this Denver assisted living home.
I enjoyed it. It came like a second nature to me.
Inside the house, she mostly worked alone 24/7 for days on end, with the owners not paying her overtime.
I felt that they weren't paying me, not even minimum wage when I would calculate the hours.
After years of waiting for relief, Ayo finally sued the owners. And last month, a civil jury sided with the 34-year-old, ruling she'd been shortchanged for years with no minimum wage and no overtime. It's expected she will ultimately be awarded at least $325,000.
It needs to serve as a warning to employers to tell them that there's real-world liability that awaits them if they decide to violate the wage theft laws.
In Colorado, the Colorado Fiscal Institute estimates nearly $728 million in wage theft last year, affecting all of us, with an estimated $45 million in lost tax revenue for the state. Every year, the State Department of Labor gets about 3,500 complaints about wage theft. A third of the complaints are for less than $500.
They're really being taken advantage of. So they're working hard. They're doing their very best to provide for themselves and their families, and then having their money and benefits stolen by unscrupulous employers. And people who engage in wage theft are denying those dreams to those that deserve it.
Wage theft is taking a toll on Florida's restaurants and hotels. And our reporting found the state falls short when it comes to helping victims fight back. According to the Economic Policy Institute, employers in Florida steal millions in wages from their workers. But without a state agency to track the crime, victims have to look elsewhere for help. Here's Miami reporter Joan Murray.
Roofing South Florida, it's demanding, dangerous, and physically draining. Back in 2019 and 2020, Alejandro Perez Gonzalez found himself high up, nailing and waterproofing for Chow Roofing at a rate of $130 a day.
Al principio nos pagaba.
At the beginning, he would pay us, but he absolutely, at the end, did us wrong.
It happens in construction, to farm workers, home health and childcare workers, in hotels, and Florida's booming restaurant business.
I worked at every corporate restaurant you could think of, in and out, multiple positions.
And during 16 years of being a South Florida server, bartender, and manager, Josh Windheim said he determined he wasn't paid fair wages and tips.
Cash tips at the end of the night, paying a bartender more than you should, them not showing you the printout at the end of the night because you're doing a 12-hour day and you just want to go home. You got the couple of $100 in your pocket. What's another 25, Joan, right? Well, that's how they get you. That's how they get you, with those little bits here and there, and then it adds up into something bigger.
Sometimes the employer just has no idea that the laws are in place or that those laws apply to their company. In those situations, that's not a defense. They still have to come into compliance.
Coming in, days off, working them, extra hours. I mean, buying uniforms, just being a yes man. And it's like, you know, it's hurtful.
Because Florida has no state agency handling unpaid wages, you can fight your case in civil court or go to the county. Miami-Dade has a wage recovery process. The Consumer Mediation Center in Miami handles disputes. Data shows pre-pandemic 2018 to 19, 1,503 wage dispute cases were filed. Workers say they lost about $3 million. Of that, a hearing officer determined $741,000 was to be repaid. Broward also has a wage recovery ordinance where you file a complaint and go to an administrative hearing. The county said just 179 workers filed cases in 3 years. But winning and collecting are two different things. Working with the outreach group We Count, Perez Gonzalez and 5 other roofers filed complaints to get back their lost wages. They won. According to documents we obtained, Child Roofing was ordered to pay Perez Gonzalez $5,910.
We were affected by this company because the boss, he doesn't want to pay us and he won't pay us.
But after 3 years, including a protest in front of the owner's home, he says he hasn't seen a dime.
Bueno, nosotros, verdad, lo que queremos es de que...
And aside from non-payment of wages, this employer has threatened us. He's intimidated us for calling immigration, wanting us to be sent back to Guatemala.
Child denied all allegations.
In Minnesota, the typical wage theft loss costs a worker the equivalent of 5 weeks of groceries. Investigative reporter Jonah Kaplan learned how the state legislature is cracking down.
At just 15 years old, Jose Diaz-Escobar had moved to Minnesota from Guatemala to be with his father. He got a job working 40 hours a week washing dishes at a Northfield restaurant.
On the week, it was 20, but on the weekend I work like 20 hours, so I make 40 hours.
Right, because you were working 40 hours and going to high school.
Yep. I sent money back home to help my family and to prove myself here, like to go to college or to be something in my life, you know. Yeah, that was hard, but I had to do it.
And if that wasn't hard enough, Escobar, now 23, vividly remembering finding a problem with his paycheck. He was missing 10 to 15 hours a week. He says he put up with it for 2 years. And by our calculations, that's around $8,000 in missed wages.
I mean, 2 years, that's a lot of money left on the table.
Yeah.
Did you ever speak up? Did you ever ask a question?
Nope.
Why?
Because I was scared to lose my job.
He's certainly not alone. Data analyzed by the Department of Labor and Industry showing 745 claims of wage theft in Minnesota over the last 10 years. That's worth more than $6.5 million. The median claim, $886. That's almost a full month's rent or 5 weeks of groceries. For years, wage theft has been considered a civil issue. You owe me money, I turn around and I sue you. In 2019, though, the Minnesota legislature taking a rather unprecedented step. Minnesota is now one of the only states to pass a law that makes wage theft a felony, and it gives co-enforcement powers to the Attorney General. There are some early success stories, too, including hundreds of thousands of dollars paid up by Bartman companies to its restaurant workers. Loving Care Home Services also settling with the AG to pay $40,000 to dozens of employees.
I will say that we do need more folks working on this problem. We are oversubscribed at this point. We need more resources because the problem is just that widespread.
Only recently did the Minnesota legislature actually fund the AG's wage theft unit. Much of the work, then, still relying on the Department of Labor and Industry's Labor Standards Unit.
If a worker is able to document when they're working, how many hours they're working, maybe where it was, those are the types of things that we can rely on if that information is available. So keep those documents, keep text messages. If you're getting text messages from your employer that say, oh, don't worry, I'll pay you, and I'll pay you next time I have money in 3 weeks. Keep that stuff. It shows intent.
Which means instead of enforcement, empowerment might be the better play. And Jose Escobar agrees that's needed, especially when immigrants might be the most vulnerable. He's since moved into construction work and joined a union. His message to colleagues, there's nothing more American than advocating for yourself.
It's a good thing to give your family better life and futures.
Bartman Companies admitted no wrongdoing in their settlement. Some workers aren't even aware wage theft is a crime, but one woman is taking her experience to TikTok to teach others about how to get what they're owed. Wage theft has been around for generations, but some young victims don't even know it's a crime. Our Philadelphia reporter Matt Petrillo met a woman who's using TikTok to teach.
Catherine Coker of Manayunk has built a fan base on TikTok, not for her dance moves,
day in my life, sharing my story,
but for her dozens of videos about what's called wage theft.
We are tying flyers about wage theft in our campaign onto candy canes and passing them out today.
Wage theft means workers not getting money they earned. Coker says she faced her own issues while working at a Philadelphia restaurant.
It was definitely frustrating. Your bills don't stop coming just because your paycheck didn't arrive. Here's a short version.
She posted a video to TikTok after she says she had delays with 2 paychecks in a row.
It got a lot of attention kind of immediately, like within 48 hours, I had like 60,000 views.
After her first TikTok, Coker says she quickly received the check she was owed for $519. Then she quit her job.
Our goal is just to spread awareness.
She has since mounted a campaign on TikTok that's all about wage theft to help workers who may be owed money.
Wage theft is rampant.
Temple law professor Jennifer Lee co-wrote this 2020 study about wage theft for the Scheller Center for Social Justice. She says city and statewide, more can be done to help workers.
There are governmental agencies where you can file complaints. The problem is the agencies don't take every case, they don't work very quickly, and as you know, if you're missing wages, you need your wages immediately. I want to talk more about filing a wage theft complaint.
Coker, the TikToker, says she filed a complaint with the Pennsylvania Labor and Industry Department in July, but it took about 2 months to get a response.
Is 2 months fast enough?
Someone should hear within that same week that they file a claim with us.
Brian Smolak is the Labor Law Compliance Director at the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry and says if people don't hear back within a week, they should follow up.
Our Bureau works to try to have employers held accountable.
Data we obtained from the Labor and Industry Department shows it reviews about 5,000 complaints about labor law violations a year. Between 45 and 55% of investigative cases result in a collection, and last year the department returned about $7.5 million to workers. Catherine Coker continues to post new videos on her TikTok page. She has this advice for workers who are owed money from their employer.
Make some noise, public pressure matters.
We started our reporting in California, where we learned how one county is fighting wage theft. So why aren't more communities doing something similar? That's what Sacramento investigative reporter Julie Watts wanted to find out.
You say, pay up or lose your food permit.
That's eventually what happens, yes.
Program manager Jesse Yu explains the Santa Clara County Office of Labor Enforcement began searching the state's list of unpaid wage theft judgments for businesses that sell food in their county, ranging from markets to bakeries to catering companies. Then they threatened to shut them down with one of these until employers paid their outstanding wage theft judgments. I think some people might wonder, what does wage theft have to do with a food permit?
All food permit holders are required to abide by all local, state, and federal laws and regulations.
And so if they don't pay their workers, they're violating state law.
That's correct.
And while their program is limited to food permits, Yu notes it could theoretically be expanded to any business with a required license or permit. What might be some of the limitations for other counties to take this on?
I think resources and support.
While San Francisco has a similar program and San Diego is now considering one, not every county has an Office of Labor Enforcement or the money to staff this type of program. Another limitation? By the time the state finally issues a judgment and the county reaches out, Some businesses have already shut down or changed ownership. Santa Clara County is just relaunching its pilot program, which they had to pause amid the pandemic shortly after a successful start. But they say 8 out of the 8 businesses they threatened with one of these either set up a payment plan or paid workers in full within 30 days. Can we take what Santa Clara County is doing and broaden it statewide?
Absolutely.
Assemblymember Ash-har Quraishi believes statewide legislation should expand enforcement to include pulling a variety of permits and licenses until all businesses pay their wage theft judgments.
We do have power over the ability of these businesses to operate in our state.
And State Senator Durazo agrees.
We as legislators have to take responsibility for trying to pass laws that have more teeth in them. Now, you know, the reality is that there's a counter influence.
Both pro-labor lawmakers cite pushback from the Chamber of Commerce. So real talk here, what's it going to take? How long are we talking before we can see a statewide program that really does have penalties for businesses who are not paying these judgments?
Well, let's be realistic. In this building, it's really hard.
You get called job killer by the Chamber of Commerce.
But the Chamber insists they want bad actors held accountable too.
The enforcement really should be focused on the bad actors who are intentionally stealing wages from employees.
Jennifer Barrera, CEO of the California Chamber of Commerce, says not all wage theft violations are intentional.
We have the most complex labor and employment laws, I would argue, in the country.
And she says those who misinterpret complicated laws should repay employees, but shouldn't be penalized. Although not all wage theft is a mistake, and even after employers are found guilty, the data shows many bosses simply don't pay.
There are mechanisms and tools that the Labor Commissioner has to make sure that those judgments are paid, are enforced.
But it appears the Labor Commissioner can't keep up. Her office denied repeated interview requests, but in an email said last year they collected $2.8 million in wage claims on behalf of 311 workers. Compare that to the $50.5 million owed on 2,300 judgments from last year alone.
Through the course of our reporting, we discovered that wage theft can happen anywhere to anyone, from major corporations to mom and pop shops. It typically happens in small increments, adding up to billions. The #1 financial crime against workers in America each year. Whether it's stealing tips or not paying overtime, that theft means workers may struggle to feed their families, pay rent, or afford medical care. When a worker doesn't get paid, they aren't putting money back into the economy or able to pay their taxes. And that affects us all. It's why we all should care who is owed.